Hello viewers, Tesseract from Odyssey here. This is bringing you a quick video on quantum controlling. I'm going to be assuming a basic level of knowledge with controlling itself here. This video is largely going to be about the different loadout choices you've got from the different options available and the time and the space trees for controlling. So I'm going to be going through all the different types of moves that you generally speaking need to use as a controller. So for instance, your typical controller loadout is going to be comprised of your power over time move, your instant power move, power restoration supercharge in there as well. You're also going to have a defense debuff, and then the other moves that tend to fill out your kind of standard loadouts, so your personal shields or your other kinds of debuffs that you can use. And I'm going to cover the differences between the two different trees that we've got and when you would use the different ones that we have available. To get us started, we're going to look at the power over time. Now in the time tree, the power over time move is Tachyon Burst. As usual, it's the first move in the tree, and you can see there that it sets up the destabilized power interaction that the time tree makes use of. It is a stun move that will lift your target into the air, and it will surround them with this blue column of light. The space tree equivalent is called Gravitonic Field. Likewise, it sets up the power interaction that the space tree uses. It's also a stun move, and it causes a little tick of damage over time on the target as well. Both of these moves seem really similar, but there's a couple of things that you might want to take into consideration when choosing which one you use. First of all, Gravitonic Field, the space tree one, only affects a single target, so you will only hit one target, you'll only damage one target. When using it, you'll only stun one target. On the other hand, Tachyon Burst from the time tree will hit two targets so long as they're reasonably close together. This will damage them and it will stun them both. One of the other things to consider when choosing between these two moves is that the crowd control effect of them works slightly differently for each. So with the Tachyon Burst from the time tree, if you stun one of them and you have a tank comes along and tries to pull them, they'll be unable to do so. You've locked those targets in place, they cannot move. Gravitonic Field, however, if you stun a target with that and a tank tries to pull them, they will be able to do so. Generally speaking, you probably want your tank to be able to move the adds around, but it can be the case where being able to lock them in place is a good thing, so it really just depends on the situation. Moving on to instant power. In Quantum, the instant power move is called Temporal Extortion, and you'll find it in the time tree. It's the second move immediately below the first move. Works exactly the same as all of the other instant power moves. Next we'll look at the supercharge options. In Quantum we have a group shield power restoration supercharge, which is called Event Horizon. This is the supercharge that you want to use in group content. There are two DPS supercharges in Quantum, and there's one self-heal supercharge, but none of them are particularly interesting. If for some reason you don't want a group shield, there are two other power restoration supercharges, one called Word of Power. It's an iconic power, and the other one is Speed Drain, which you can only use as a speedster. But as I say, Event Horizon does exactly what they do, but it also has a shield, so that's the one you want to be using. And rounding off the standard controller moves, we'll look at the defense debuffs. In the time tree, we've got Time Bomb. This is a really odd move. It takes advantage of destabilized power interaction to do a bit extra damage, but mostly you just fire out this ball towards the target, and it will slowly move towards them, and eventually when it hits them, it'll explode and do more damage. It's not very useful for DPS. The defense debuff hits immediately, but it just doesn't really have much going for it. In the space tree there is Singularity. This also takes advantage of the graviton charged effect to do extra damage, but it will also set up polarized interactions. This will have an effect where it will suck in targets around it, it will do an AoE damage, and it will do damage over time to the main target. At the end of the initial effect, there will be an explosion and everything will be everything will explode away from the centre of the area. For virtually all of the other moves we'll talk about, there'll be reasons when you use one or the other, but for the defense debuff, just stick with Singularity. So you'll have powered over time, you'll have your instant power, you'll have your group shield power restoration supercharge, and you'll have your defense debuff. That leaves you two variable slots on your loadout, which you'll kind of swap in with other debuffs or crowd control moves or shields. So we're going to look at your different options for those. First of all, we're going to look at the damage debuff. In the time tree we have Warp Barrage. It takes advantage of the destabilized power interaction to do extra damage. It's got a bit of an odd damage timing on this, in that you'll do the attack and it'll take a couple of seconds for the damage to go through. It'll hit 4 targets, the debuff only hits 1 of course, and it'll hit from long range. It doesn't have any extra effects, but then there's no real downsides to it either. In the space tree we have Alcubia Wave. This sets up the graviton charged power interaction and has an AoE effect. It's also a really odd effect. As you can see here, if you use it on a target in front of you, it'll push them back, but that's not all it does. It acts in an AoE field around you, and it'll pull people from behind you and throw them forward as well. So the power interaction effect and the push or pull and throw over mechanic, that acts in an AoE that's centred around your character. It doesn't go that far in front of you, but it also covers the area behind you. On the other hand, the actual debuff mechanic still works at long range, even if you're not actually getting off the push mechanic. As you can see here, the target was successfully debuffed even though they weren't moved. This makes Alcubia Wave a really interesting choice for using for your damage debuff move. It gives you an extra bit of utility, but again it also means you're going to be crowd controlling a bit more, and you might not want to be doing that. Then we have the healing debuffs. In the time tree we have Anomaly. This will set up the destabilised power interaction. It's a multi-target of about 4 targets, and it's melee AoE centred around your character. This can make it really useful in PvP. You'll hit a lot of people with it, getting that good crowd control effect off on the people that are right up in your face. But in PvE you generally don't want to be that close to the bosses. It's not been that often that we've needed the healing debuff in PvE, but bosses like Ravager in Paradox, it can be used. So, looking then at the space tree, we have Gravity Bomb. This takes advantage of the graviton charged power interaction to deal more damage, but it also will set polarized on any graviton charged targets. It's a 4 target hit again. This time you can use it from much longer range, and it'll stun targets as well. And that'll be the same stun as Gravitonic Field uses. It doesn't have too much special going on, but it's a solid move, usable at long range, and as I say, does have that distinct advantage over Anomaly, which just won't hit the targets at such a long range. So that's us seen all of the different debuffs that we've got at our disposal. Next we're going to look at the different kinds of shielding that we've got. Quantum has access to the very unique Quantum Tunneling. This acts like Grandeur from Mental, in that it drops aggro, it shields, it breaks out of crowd control effects. But the unique part of Quantum Tunneling is that it also teleports you. The trade-off for this is that the shielding effects only last half as long as they do for the Mental or the Gadget's equivalent, which they both last 6 seconds, and for Quantum Tunneling it only lasts 3 seconds. The actual range on the teleport, as you can see here, it goes about 4 squares in this League Hall base. And some of the interesting things you can do with this is that you can teleport through any destructible objects. So your base decorations or anything like that, those you'll be able to pass straight through. If it's a wall, you're going to smack right into it. We also have access to Time Bubble, which is just a normal shield that will prevent so much damage from coming before and you can be interrupted. Both Quantum Tunneling and Time Bubble are very useful and under different circumstances. So Quantum Tunneling will let you move further to get reses, whereas Time Bubble is going to let you survive an AoE field longer to get the res. If in doubt, use both. Next we'll look at some crowd control moves, and first of all we're going to look at pools. So each movement holder has a pool, and the iconic tree has a pool as well, but in Quantum we have our own called Einstein's Ray. It's in the space tree. It doesn't take advantage of any doesn't do any power interactions or anything like that, but it does have a combo that you can do at the end. The advantage that it has over the movement mode pulls is that not only does it pull, but it will stun as well. That means that if you're pulling heads towards you, they're not going to turn around and smack you in the face. As I said, it has a combo move as well. You need to tap square after you've done the pull move, and you'll do an uppercut on the target that you've just pulled. I think this actually breaks them out of the stun, and I've never seen any need to use it, but it's quite cool. Next, looking at some of the big multi-target crowd control moves that we have, first of all we're going to look at Distortion Wave. This is a little bit like Anomaly in that it's an AoE centred around you, but it's got a much bigger range and it should hit up to 8 targets. It's in the time tree. It sets up the time tree power interaction, and it has that same stun as the time tree, so adds that have been stunned with this move won't be able to be moved by tanks. We also have Gravity Well, which is in the space tree. It has a multi-target stun like Distortion Wave, but it is a ranged move. This would make it really, really handy if it wasn't also one of the main DPS moves, and it would overwrite. So if you happen to be running with any quantum DPS, chances are you do not want to be using this move. It's unfortunate because, as I say, ranged rather than melee is usually a good idea. Lastly, I'm just going to talk about Warped Reality, which is the weapon buff move that Quantum has. It inflicts the space tree power interaction. It has a chance to do extra might-based damage on your weapon attacks or your power attacks. Basically, if you don't have anything else to put on your loadout, if there's no need for anything else, then you can put this on, get a little bit more DPS. Or set up the power interaction for Singularity or things that moves like Gravity Well that will help your DPS out. So just to go over what moves you're going to be using then. For powered overtime, it's really not a huge deal. Go with which one you like the best. Gravitonic Field or Tachyon Burst. For instant power, you're going to be using Temporal Extortion. And for the defense debuff, you really want to be using Singularity. There's no need to be using Time Bomb. Group Supercharge, you want your Event Horizon. Then for these last two slots, really quite interchangeable. Time Bubble and Quantum Tunneling are both really handy. Use them both, use one, use the other as you like. Other moves that you can have here, we have Distortion Wave for a nice big AoE crowd control move. If you need a pull, we've got Einstein's Ray. If you're using Singularity to defense debuff, you need Einstein's Ray to buy into it, so you should always have that available anyway. There's Warped Reality, which can set up some of your power interactions. There's a little bit more damage. You can use it to clip some attacks. Just generally, if you've not got anything to go in that slot, feel free to throw it on. Your healing debuff in PvE, you really want to be Gravity Bomb, but in PvP, feel free to switch that out for Anomaly. And then your damage debuff, you've got Alcubia Wave or Warp Barrage. Warp Barrage if you don't really like that push-pull mechanic, but if you do, it can be really handy sometimes. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know what loadouts you like, what moves are your favourite in the comments below, and thanks for watching.